Hi there everyone, it's TextFamGuy1 and I'm here to update you on my current progress on the Rail Uncut Alpha. So for a while I've had not very much progress made on this because I had a very long busy period at university, and I'm going to have a little bit of time off now, not a very great deal, I still have a dissertation to work on, but I'm going to be resuming mapping on Rail Uncut for a little bit. So on the previous videos you've seen the A maps in Alpha, which were A2 and A1, and those were the first two maps of Rail Uncut. And so I'm currently working on the third and fourth maps. The third map has just been completed and has been released for Community Alpha, and this video is going to be showcasing that today. This is going to be a fairly lengthy introduction because I'm going to be talking about the project as a whole as well as what the B maps are as a whole. So please, if you're not interested, just skip ahead to about 3 minutes, that's when my map starts. But otherwise, a bit of background on the B maps. So in Half-Life 1, roughly slightly beyond halfway through on a rail, the theme of the rail system switched from that of predominantly office complexes to a sort of material transit system, which was sort of storage and transport for crates and things. And in Half-Life 1 this shift was quite apparent, it was quite interesting thematically, it helped alleviate some of the boredom of being underground for such a long period of time. And this transition was basically completely missing in Black Mesa because they didn't include pretty much any maps from the later half of On a Rail. So I'm trying to bring this thematic shift back in a variety of ways, which hopefully helps to reduce the boredom and keep the chapter more interesting and fresh throughout, which is a problem with fairly long chapters such as On a Rail. And as well as having lots of crates and moving parts in the B maps, which are the next two maps you're about to see, well, only one so far. I'm in the process of beginning the fourth. But on these maps, I've helped try to differentiate them from Black Mesa by having quite dramatically different lighting and design style. So all the walls and the lighting and the textures and things that you're going to see during the B maps are going to be quite different to what you see on the rest of On a Rail. And I think this is good for a number of reasons. Firstly, it helps make those segments stand out a bit more, even though they already stand out thematically. And it also helps alleviate a little bit of, I guess, theme boredom, because if you play sort of 7 or 8 maps with the same sort of lighting and colouring, it can get a bit boring. So now we're about to transition from Black Mesa's B map into my B1 map. One of the problems which was brought up on the forums was that having 2 maps after priming the rocket and before launching the rocket would be a bit confusing, and why would Gordon have to take such a long journey to get to the launch pad? So this following sequence is my attempt to try and explain why that might be the case. So here we can see the HEC were blocking something off, and we're going to find out what once I clear them out. So if we look, there's the primary launch pad access. It's quite clearly labelled. I tried to make it fairly obvious so most players will pick up on it. They clearly knew I was coming this way, and they've now prevented me from being able to access the rocket easily. So I'm going to have to try and find a long way out. And this helps to explain why over the course of the B maps Gordon takes a fairly hefty detour through a fairly expansive material transit system. And hopefully the signposting and the thematic shift and the lighting shift will help most players understand precisely why Gordon has to take such a long way round, and allow them to make sense of why everything suddenly seems so different. So I'm in a security office here, and I come across 2 guards who look the same. There's another bug that's slipped under the cracks. Bear in mind this is an alpha, it's heavily a work in progress, so there's going to be problems like that throughout. It's available on the Black Mesa forums if you want to check it out. Otherwise, I'd wait for the beta release, which will be in a couple of weeks to a month's time. So I've opened up the sealed material transit system, and let's head inside. And we can immediately see that they suspected I might do this, and they prepared accordingly. I accidentally fuck up against that turret. So now I'm stuck fighting the HECU's traps, so let's see how I deal with it. Nice throw. Okay, so this was a fairly memorable room from Half-Life 1. It didn't have the moving crates. I added them again to try and emphasize the material transport theme. These were pretty much seen on Half-Life's F map. This is a remake of Half-Life's E map. But they were a really memorable element that was really underused in Half-Life 1, so I tried to bring them more to the fore than they were in Half-Life 1. I'm getting absolutely dominated. Oh, I just dodged that trip mine. That was close. Oh! Bollocks. I'm really sorry you guys had to see that. In this room I've tried to follow my general redesign principle, which I've used throughout on a Rail Uncut, which is to expand vertically where I think the rooms were too well designed or unique in the original to expand horizontally. Oh, we can see the HECU fell victim to bull squids here, which is why I'm only dealing with their traps. So you can see the lighting's quite radically different. Whereas the majority of On a Rail in Black Mesa was reddish, rust reddish in lighting, this is much bluer and white and more neutral. And it's a bit more of a Half-Life 1 feel. Black Mesa's On a Rail in terms of lighting was quite a hefty departure from Half-Life 1 in lighting. And this is more of a cold Half-Life 1 tone. So this is another fairly iconic room with a very large Vought ambush. Give him the crowbar for good measure. Wouldn't be Gordon Freeman without the crowbar. Just looking around here, it should be fairly clear that I've gone for a cleaner, colder and newer look for the material transit system. Again, this is partly to alleviate boredom which would occur over the course of a long chapter which looks the same throughout, but also it helps to emphasise that the material transit system is more modern and more heavily used than the rest of the On a Rail system. And I actually got this style of lighting and the theme from Black Mesa's apprehension maps, which featured a few tunnels which looked like these tunnels in the beginning. And I think they probably just left them there as a nod to Half-Life 1's lighting, even though they wanted to change it themselves. And then surprise head crabs! Well, hey, I'm afraid no heads are going to get crabbed today, buddy. So here you can see the vent that they came out of. The little bastards love to hide in vents. Right, let's try and get over this. Damn it. Okay, so my attempt at being Flash having failed, let's just clear it the safe way. So at the top of these stairs, the HECU have barricaded against the Vaults, thinking clearly they wouldn't be able to face them. This was present in Half-Life 1 as well, although there were less of them. So let's try and take them on.
Kick your ass.
Will you now? Okay, maybe he will. I'm sorry. Alright, that worked. So you can see the design of the offices is much cleaner, it's much more minimalistic, and the HEC have been moving a lot of stuff around. You'll see this throughout the chapter. But in general, it's cleaner, newer looking, it looks nicer. I mean, the rest of Black Mesa's On a Rail didn't really look like anywhere nice to work, but this looks alright. And that's the idea. Again, it's thematic juxtaposition. So this is just a little side office I added because the hallway felt a bit empty without something there. The infamous On a Rail graffiti. And there's a little bit of a dark story here. See if you can figure it out. It's not terribly complicated. I just like having environmental storytelling. I think it's something that Valve have always done really well, and I'm trying to replicate that on my maps. You know, just little stories that you can read from the environment that different players can interpret differently. And it's one of the strengths of video games as a medium, I think. It's kind of got that creative element to it, like books, where there's a lot that can be left up to the player's imagination, which can be a really powerful storytelling element. So here we have the dual track room. And in Half-Life 1, once you get to this area with your tram, you'll see that an enemy tram will run alongside you. And one of the ways in which I dramatically redesigned this area is, in Half-Life 1, when the enemy's tram ran alongside you, the, quote, right option was to commandeer it and ride it towards the turntable room, which is the next big area. And if you kept on your own tram, you'd move round to a blocked-off dynamite hallway, where an HECU guy would blow you up. And you'd have to then backtrack all the way across the map, and manually walk all the way to the turntable room. So my redesign, I tried to make it so that both options led you to the turntable room, so there'd be no frustrating backtracking. And this actually required a very, very complicated redesign process, which took me a very long time, but I'm ultimately very pleased with the results. So you'll see your tram will come down this track I'm standing by, and the enemy tram will come along the opposing one. So let's just quickly dash back to our tram and check that one out. And we'll just let this little scripted sequence play out. Again, I quite like these little scripted sequences because they help make the world feel a bit more real, like it doesn't revolve around Gordon Freeman, which is always nice. While I was digging through the voice file lines for the grunts, I found that, and that just amused me so much I had to stick it in there. I know it kind of detracts from the tone and the seriousness a little bit, but what the hell. So here we have the Marine firing the rocket launcher at you, which was another fairly iconic sequence from Half-Life 1. And I have to say it's not recreated brilliantly here, partly because the Marines have an absolutely awful aim with the tow. It's not my fault, I didn't program them like that, that's just the way they are. So here I'm going to quickly jump over, and I've taken the tram. So, just for the purposes of demonstration, although I'd expect most players to carry on, I'll just go and show you what would happen if I'd stayed on my tram. So I would have gone through here. The door is lowered as a way of showing to the player that the right thing to do is to take the enemy tram, even though you can still carry through on yours. Just a subtle cue. So if I carry through this way, you'll see I come up across a sentry who will fire at me, which I wouldn't do otherwise if I was on the enemy tram. So there's kind of a reward for stealing the enemy's tram, but you're not absolutely wrecked if you stick to your own. So this next room's the turntable room. It's a fairly iconic room from Half-Life 1, which I've quite dramatically redesigned. It was a really well-designed room, but the ambush itself wasn't terribly memorable. And my friend the Empire here has written a fantastic track for me to use during this ambush, and I'm just going to let it speak for itself. In terms of difficulty, it's fairly similar to the Questionable Ethics ambush. It took me 6 or 7 attempts to get it all the way through in one go, which is why you'll see this cut here. I'm playing on hard difficulty. Found the reinforcements. Oh dear. Don't think it's over yet. Right, so the first wave of enemies in that fight, which is 5 night vision marines, I programmed them to behave very, very passively and defensively, and they generally hang back a lot. Whoa, dear! Okay, he didn't notice me. And the idea is that it creates quite a sense of tension that you don't really get in many other fights with the HECU. They're sort of playing quite tactically, and I really, really enjoyed the first wave of this fight, because it's kind of a game of cat and mouse. You're both playing quite cautiously. And the fight overall, I'm very, very pleased with the way it turned out. I think the mood is quite unique. It's very memorable. And again, massive thanks to the Empire for writing this piece for me. It's I really, really love it. It might not seem like an obvious choice for a battle track at first, because it's quite laid back and quite sad sounding, but it's really, really grown on me, and it's sort of it's quite subtle, and I enjoy that, because most of the battle tracks in Black Mesa are very overt and very in your face, which is a good thing, but it doesn't hurt to have a bit of juxtaposition here and there. So now I've turned the power back on after the HECU tried to ambush me with the advantage of darkness, and you just have to try and figure out what to do next. And if I flick the switch, you'll see here that I'm adjusting the turntable to lead towards the open doorway, so I can carry my tram through. And again, in the background, you can see the crate transport popping up again. That's their second cameo. I carry my train across. And if you'd taken the other tram from the left, your original tram, you can also carry it across the turntable in this fashion. Both ways work. It actually took me a hell of a long time to program that to work properly. It was making me tear my hair out at one point, but eventually, with enough of a struggle, I got there. So here's the scene where you first meet your good friends, the Satchel Charges, who maybe see used 3 times throughout the entire game. And there's a little lift sequence here, which is very memorable from Half-Life 1, which I'll show you in a little bit. Firstly, I'm just going to go and access this little secret stash here. I believe quite strongly in secret stashes. They were quite a big part of Half-Life 2, and I just think they're a really cool element to reward players who explore, which is always a good thing. I'll just pop a hard save here so that I can come back if I have to. So here's a turntable lift leading up to the top floor. And since the rocket, here's your first glimpse of the outdoors. But just let me deal with these Marines first. Whoa! Oh dear, oh dear, oh, what? Oh god, what? Whoa, I am bloody awesome. Oh, another one. Oh, this isn't going to end well. Oh, I'm done. Oh, I'm alive. I'm alive. Jesus. Oh god. That fight was absolutely ridiculous. I'm really sorry you guys had to watch that. Right, let's try again. Right, let's take a different approach. Running in head first wasn't the brightest idea, which is a shame because normally it works so well. We're coming up to the scene which I've affectionately labelled Explodey Death, and if you actually look in the game's files, I have called it that. This is a very memorable scene from Half-Life 1. Only the satchels will work here. Anything else, and you will blow yourself up quite painfully. So here we go. Kaboom! Very large explosion. Unfortunately, that will lag for pretty much anyone. There's nothing really I could do about that. That's just the way it's designed. So hopefully the guy that was standing there has been evaporated. I can try and thin them out a bit more from a slightly better position. So again, it's quite possible to conquer that scene from taking the tram straight to the lift, like I did. I've actually done it before on quite a few test runs, but it's tactically advantageous to go up the pedestrian lift, like I did there. And he's dead, I'm fairly sure. So I'm just going to look around this little loading bay, which actually has an exterior area, a little glimpse of the outdoors. And this is something that On a Rail didn't really do much in Half-Life 1, and it was a big weakness. The settings weren't varied enough. And having a little glimpse of the outside, even though it may not seem like much, it really helps to alleviate some of the potential boredom of being underground for so long. And B2, which is going to be the next map, will feature a lot of outdoor areas, and particularly a very large outdoor one. Hopefully, again, just to try and alleviate some of the boredom which comes from being indoors for too long. And again, address one of the biggest weaknesses, I think, of On a Rail from Half-Life 1. So now I've cleared out the Marines, I should have a much easier time of heading through the final section of B1, which is the electricity puzzle. I've made this quite a bit harder than it was in Half-Life 1, because in Half-Life 1 it was a bit of a doddle. And so now the timing is quite tricky, but it's quite easily doable. And there's 4 beams instead of 2, like there were in Half-Life 1. And I'm using the electricity effects from Questionable Ethics. Whoop! There we go. So the 2 different generators have their own unique timings, and bosh! Done. And this is the end of B1. And I've pretty much just started working on B2, and I'm hoping to have that completed within a few weeks, and that will complete the alphas for On a Rail Uncut. At which point I'll release the beta, which will include all 4 maps. And the timescale for that, I'm not really sure about it yet, but just keep an eye on the ModDB page and you'll have an idea. Thank you all for watching, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please feel free to leave any feedback and criticisms.